On his 18th birthday, a boy was kicked out of his home with a key to a worthless, dilapidated coach house. What he discovered inside was not just an inheritance, but a second chance at life. And if you've ever felt like you've been handed a broken-down version of your own future, hit that subscribe button because this story is for you. We're building a community here for people who know what it means to start over. The key felt like a shard of ice in my palm. It was old, ornate, and rusted in the grooves. The kind of key you see in movies, the kind that opens a chest of secrets, not the front door to a life. Sharon, my stepmother, dropped it into my hand without ceremony. Her fingers were long and manicured, and they retreated from my skin as if I were something unclean. We were standing in the sterile, white hallway of the house I'd lived in for 10 years, the house my father had bought with her. Now, it was just her house. "Happy birthday, Leo," she said, the words as flat and gray as the November sky outside. "As per your father's will, the coach house and its contents are now legally yours. The title transfer was finalized this morning." She said coach house the way you'd say a pile of garbage or a festering wound. It was a problem she was finally getting rid of. Me. The house was just the box I came in. For 2 years since Dad died, I'd been a line item in her budget, a legal obligation. My 18th birthday was a release date. She handed me a thick manila envelope next. It was heavy with paperwork and smelled of her perfume, a sharp floral scent that always made my throat tighten. "This is everything you need. The deed, the lawyer's contact information, a final check from your father's trust. It's not much, but it's the last of it. The last of him." A check, a deed, and a rusty key. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like begging or rage, and I was too tired for either. I'd spent 2 years walking on eggshells, making myself smaller and smaller, until I felt like a ghost in my own home. My bedroom was already packed into 2 duffel bags and a backpack at my feet. I'd been preparing for this day for months, but the reality of it was still a punch to the gut. The finality of it. This wasn't a suggestion. It was an eviction. "The developers are making their final offer on the main property next week," she continued, her voice all business. "They'll want your parcel, too. It's essentially worthless on its own, a teardown, but it complicates their zoning application. They'll probably give you a few thousand for it out of pity. I'd take it if I were you. Take the money and get a fresh start somewhere else." A fresh start. It sounded like something you'd tell a stray dog you were dropping off at a shelter miles from home. I looked past her, through the pristine living room to the large bay window that overlooked the backyard. In the distance, just past the manicured lawn and the line of perfectly trimmed hedges, I could see the sagging roof of the coach house. It was a forgotten building at the far edge of the property, choked with ivy and shadowed by an ancient oak tree. My father used to spend all his time out there. It was his workshop, his sanctuary. After he got sick, the door was locked and no one went near it again. It just sat there, slowly surrendering to the elements, worthless. I finally found my voice, but it came out as a quiet rasp. "Okay." It was the only word I could manage. It was a white flag, acknowledgement. I wasn't going to fight. She seemed relieved, a small, tight smile barely touching her lips. "Good. It's for the best, Leo. You need to be your own man now." She didn't offer a hug. She didn't wish me well. She just opened the front door, letting in a blast of cold, damp air. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for me to leave. I slung the backpack over my shoulder and picked up the duffel bags. They were heavier than I remembered, weighted down with everything I owned in the world. As I stepped over the threshold, I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, I was afraid I'd see the ghost of my father in the doorway, his face etched with disappointment. Or worse, I'd see nothing at all. Just a clean, empty house that had already forgotten me. The walk to the coach house felt like a mile. The pristine flagstone path of the main yard gave way to overgrown grass, still wet with morning dew. The air grew colder as I moved under the shadow of the oak tree. The building was in worse shape up close than I'd imagined. Gray paint was peeling off the wood in long, curling strips, like sunburnt skin. Several windows were boarded up, and one on the second floor was shattered, a dark, gaping mouth. The ivy had worked its way into the very bones of the place, its green fingers prying at the siding and the roof tiles. It looked less like a house and more like a shipwreck, a wooden vessel slowly being dragged under by a sea of green. There was a single stone step leading up to a heavy wooden door. The lock was an old, formidable-looking thing, black with age. I looked at the key in my hand. It seemed impossibly small and fragile compared to the task ahead. For a moment, I just stood there, the weight of my bags pulling on my shoulders, the cold seeping into my bones. This was it. This was my inheritance, my fresh start. It felt like an ending. The key grated in the lock, a horrible, rusty screech that set my teeth on edge. It took both hands and all my weight to turn it, but finally, with a loud, definitive clunk, the bolt slid back. The door was swollen in its frame, and I had to put my shoulder into it to get it to budge. It opened with a groan of protest, revealing a wall of darkness and the thick, heavy smell of dust, damp earth, and forgotten time. It was the smell of a tomb. I took a deep breath, hoisted my bags, and stepped inside, leaving the world of manicured lawns and silent judgment behind me. The door swung shut on its own, the latch clicking into place with a sound like a period at the end of a very long, very sad sentence. I was home. The air inside was still and cold, colder than outside. The only light came from the grimy windows that weren't boarded up, casting weak, gray shafts through the thick dust motes dancing in the air. I was in a large, open space that must have been the main workshop. The ground floor was cavernous, with a high ceiling crisscrossed by thick wooden beams. A wide staircase with a dangerously rickety-looking banister led up to a second-floor loft. The place was a chaotic museum of my father's life. Workbenches lined the walls, buried under drop cloths that were stiff with age and dirt. Tools, rusted and silent, lay scattered across their surfaces. Half-finished projects, the skeleton of a wooden chair, a stack of intricately carved panels, a partially assembled clock face, sat gathering dust, waiting for a pair of hands that would never return. It was all just stopped. A moment frozen in time, the moment he got too sick to work and had to put his tools down for the last time. My duffel bags hit the concrete floor with a heavy thud, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. I ran a hand over a nearby workbench, leaving a clean streak in the thick layer of grime. Underneath, the wood was scarred and stained with paint and varnish, a map of 1,000 hours of labor. I could almost see him standing here, humming to himself, sawdust in his hair, his hands, always so gentle, moving with a practiced, confident grace. The memory was so sharp it felt like a physical blow. Grief is a funny thing. You think you've put it away in a neat little box, and then you walk into a room, and the smell of sawdust and old wood rips the lid right off. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the burn behind my eyes. I refused to cry. Not here, not now. I needed to be practical. I needed to figure out what to do. Sharon's voice echoed in my head. A teardown. Worthless. Looking around, I couldn't argue. There was no electricity, no running water. The roof looked like it would leak in the first serious rain. It was a shell, filled with ghosts and junk. The developers would give me a few thousand for it. I could take that money, get on a bus, and just disappear. The thought was tempting. It was the easy way out, a clean break. But then my eyes landed on a small, sturdy-looking wooden chest tucked away under one of the workbenches. It was different from the rest of the clutter. It wasn't covered in as much dust. It looked placed, deliberate. My curiosity got the better of me. I knelt down, my knees cracking in the cold, and dragged it out. It was made of dark, polished oak, the same wood my father loved to work with, and it was surprisingly heavy. There was no lock, just a simple brass latch. My fingers trembled slightly as I lifted it. Inside there wasn't treasure, there were letters. Dozens of them, tied in neat bundles with twine. They were all addressed to me, in my father's familiar, elegant script. Leo. My breath hitched. I picked up the top bundle. The paper was thick and creamy, not yellowed with age. These hadn't been sitting here for years, they felt recent. A small, folded note was tucked into the twine of the first bundle. I carefully worked it free and unfolded it. Leo, it began. If you are reading this, then it means I'm gone and you are finally 18. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for leaving you, and I'm sorry for what you must have gone through to get to this place. But I need you to listen. This house is not what it seems, and neither was my life. Start with the letter marked number 1. Read them in order. Please, it's the most important thing I will ever ask of you. Your loving father, David. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. This wasn't just a collection of old letters. This was a map, a final conversation. I fumbled through the bundles until I found the one with a small number 1 written on the top envelope. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely break the seal. I pulled out the pages, sat down on the dusty floor amidst the ghosts of my father's work, and in the fading gray light of a dying afternoon, I began to read. My dearest Leo, it started. Happy 18th birthday. I wish, more than anything in the world, that I could be there to say that to you in person. I imagine you're a man now, and I bet you look a hell of a lot like I did, which is both a blessing and a curse. I hope you got your mother's kind eyes, though. I always loved her eyes. I had to stop and take a breath. My mother died when I was 5. I barely remembered her, except for a few blurry, sun-drenched images and the scent of lavender. My father rarely spoke of her. It was too painful. To see her mentioned here, so plainly, so lovingly, felt like a window opening in a sealed room. I know you're probably in the old coach house, the letter continued, and I know what Sharon has probably told you about it, that it's a worthless ruin, that you should sell it and run. She doesn't mean to be cruel, son. She's just a practical woman. She sees things for what they are on the surface, for their market value. She cannot see the heart of things. I need you to see the heart of this place. Because this isn't just a building. It's a promise. It's my apology. It's your future if you're brave enough to claim it. I read on, my eyes devouring the words. He wrote about his life before he met Sharon. He had been a craftsman, an artist who restored antique furniture and clocks. He'd had a small but successful business, a passion that was his whole world. But it wasn't a world that Sharon, a pragmatic real estate agent, understood or valued. When they married, she saw his workshop as a hobby, a messy and unprofitable distraction from a real career. She wanted me to join her in the real estate world, he wrote. Flipping houses, chasing commissions. She saw the money in it, the security. And after your mother died, I was lost, Leo. I was terrified of not being able to provide for you. So I agreed. I put my tools away. I put on a suit. And a part of me died that day. I told myself it was for you, for your future. But a man who isn't living his own truth can't build a real future for anyone. The letter went on to explain that over the years, he started sneaking back out to the coach house. At first, just to clean his tools, to feel the familiar weight of a chisel in his hand. Then, he started working again, in secret. Late at night, when Sharon was asleep, he'd come out here and build. He poured all his frustration, all his grief, all his unspoken love for his craft into the wood. He wasn't just building furniture. He was building a legacy. He was building an escape. Sharon never knew the extent of it, he wrote. She thought I was just tinkering, but I was saving my soul, Leo. And I was saving something for you. Something more than a number in a bank account. Something real. Something you can touch. The letter ended there with a simple instruction. Look beneath the workbench with the vise. The third floorboard from the wall. It's loose. Your real inheritance starts there. I put the letter down, my mind reeling. A secret life. A hidden world right under my nose. I looked around the workshop, but now I saw it differently. It wasn't a tomb. It was a treasure chest, and my father had just handed me the key. I scrambled over to the workbench he'd described. It was an old, heavy-duty piece of equipment bolted to the floor. I got down on my hands and knees, the cold of the concrete seeping through my jeans. I ran my fingers over the floorboards. They were wide, thick planks of ancient wood, covered in a century of dust and grime. 1, 2, 3. The third board. I pressed on it. Nothing. I pushed harder, trying to find a loose edge. My fingers, numb with cold, scrabbled at the seams. It felt solid. My heart sank. Had I imagined it? Was this some kind of cruel joke? A dying man's fantasy? Then my fingers brushed against a small, almost invisible indentation near the end of the board. A knot in the wood? No, it was too regular. I pressed it, and I felt a faint click. I tried the edge of the board again, and this time it lifted. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just a board. It was the lid of a hidden compartment, expertly cut and fitted so it was nearly invisible. I pulled it up. The space beneath was about 3 feet deep and lined with zinc to keep out the damp. And it was full. My first impression was of dark wood and polished brass. Carefully wrapped in oilcloth were tools, not the rusted, forgotten ones on the benches above, but a pristine, magnificent set of hand tools. Chisels with rosewood handles, gleaming hand planes, intricate measuring devices in brass and steel. They looked like museum pieces, but they were the tools of a master craftsman, and they felt alive in my hands. Beneath them were stacks of leather-bound journals. I pulled one out and opened it. It was filled with my father's drawings, detailed schematics for furniture, designs for complex clock mechanisms, notes on different types of wood, and observations on his craft. It was a lifetime of knowledge, a master's degree in a forgotten art, all written out in his hand. And at the very bottom, there was a heavy, steel cash box. It was locked. Of course, it was locked. I felt a surge of frustration. Then I remembered the letters. I scrambled back to the chest and found the envelope marked number 2. I tore it open. Leo, if you found the compartment, then you found my tools and my journals. They are the best part of me. Learn from them. The tools will feel clumsy in your hands at first, but be patient. The wood will teach you. The knowledge in those books is everything I ever learned. It's yours now. As for the cash box, the key is in a place Sharon would never think to look. Remember that awful porcelain cat she kept on the mantel? The one with the chipped ear? I always told her I hated it. I told her that so she'd never, ever touch it. The key is inside. I hope she hasn't thrown it out. A laugh escaped my lips, a short, sharp bark of sound that was shockingly loud in the silent workshop. It was the first time I had laughed in what felt like years. The sheer, brilliant absurdity of it, hiding a key in the one object he'd trained his wife to despise. It was a move of pure, simple genius. But it also meant I had to go back. I had to go back to that house. The thought filled me with a cold dread. Facing Sharon again, asking for a kitschy porcelain cat. It felt impossible. But the cash box sat there, a dense, implacable promise. I had no choice. I had to know what was inside. I spent the rest of the afternoon exploring my new kingdom. I climbed the rickety stairs to the loft, which served as a storage area and a small, makeshift living space. There was a dusty cot in one corner, a small table with a single chair, and shelves filled with books. Not on woodworking, but poetry, history, philosophy. This was where he came to be himself. Looking out the grimy window, I could see the lights of the main house flickering on as dusk fell. It looked like a dollhouse from here, perfect and pristine and utterly alien. A life I was no longer a part of. As darkness settled, the cold in the coach house became a physical presence. It sank into my bones. I had no power, no heat, just a weak flashlight from my backpack and a growing sense of desperation. I had to go back for that key. I pulled on my jacket, took a deep breath, and stepped back out into the night. The walk back across the lawn felt like crossing enemy territory. I felt like a trespasser, a beggar. I crept up to the back patio and peered through the glass doors. The living room was empty, bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp. Sharon was probably in the kitchen. My heart hammered against my ribs. I could just walk in. I still had my old key. She hadn't taken that. But the thought of confrontation paralyzed me. I waited, hidden in the shadows of a large shrub, for what felt like an eternity. Finally, I saw her walk through the living room, a glass of wine in her hand, and head up the main staircase. This was my chance. I slipped my key into the lock of the patio door, turned it as quietly as I could, and slid inside. The house was warm and smelled of roasted chicken. My stomach growled in protest. I hadn't eaten since a piece of toast that morning. I ignored it and crept into the living room. And there it was, on the white marble mantel above the gas fireplace, the porcelain cat. It was just as ugly as I remembered, a fat, smug-looking thing with painted blue eyes and a garish pink bow, and a chipped left ear. My hands were shaking as I reached for it. It was cold and smooth to the touch. I turned it over. There was a small felt pad on the bottom. I peeled it back, and there, nestled in a small cavity, was a tiny brass key. I had it. I pocketed it, my fingers closing around the cold metal, and turned to leave. And that's when I saw it. On the polished mahogany coffee table, spread out like a battle plan, were blueprints. They were architectural drawings for a multi-story condo building, and in the corner of the lot, right where the coach house stood, was a red circle with the words, Phase 2 Demolition. They weren't just planning to buy it, they were planning to erase it. And sitting right next to the blueprints was a formal offer letter from the development company. My eyes scanned the numbers. The offer for the main property was substantial. And then I saw the line item for my parcel. Parcel B, coach house property. The offer was $10,000. $10,000 for my father's soul. Sharon had said a few thousand. She had lied. She was lowballing me, hoping I'd be desperate enough to take the first offer that came along. Rage, cold and clean, washed over me. It was so much more than just the money. It was the deception, the utter disrespect for my father, for his memory, for the one thing he had tried to leave for me. She wasn't just kicking me out. She was trying to rob me of my own history. I backed out of the room, my movements silent and deliberate. I slipped out the patio door, locking it behind me, and retreated into the darkness, the tiny brass key a burning coal in my fist. Back in the freezing coach house, I worked the small key into the lock on the cash box. It turned smoothly. I lifted the lid. It wasn't full of cash, not entirely. On top was another letter, this one sealed with wax. Beneath it were thick, neat bundles of $100 bills. I didn't count it right away. I didn't care about the money in that moment. I only cared about the letter. Leo, this one began, this money is your seed, your start. It's not a fortune, but it's everything I managed to save from my secret work over the years. It's clean money, honest money, earned with my own 2 hands. Use it to make this place livable, get the power back on, fix the roof, buy food. But most importantly, use it to buy yourself time. Time is the most valuable thing I can give you now. Time to think. Time to learn. Time to decide what kind of man you want to be. He went on to explain the situation with the developers. He'd known it was coming. He'd seen the way the neighborhood was changing, the old properties being snapped up and torn down for bland, soulless condos. They'll come for the coach house, son. They see it as a dead space on a map. You and I know it's a living thing. They will try to take it from you. Sharon will help them, not because she is evil, but because she believes in the logic of the market above all else. She will see it as helping you, giving you a practical start in life. Do not let her. Do not let them bulldoze your history. This property is more than just land. It has a unique historical designation. I spent 2 years fighting the city to get it. It's a registered historical workshop because of the original owner, a famous clockmaker from the 1890s. The paperwork is in the bottom of this box. It makes it very, very difficult to demolish. It doesn't make it impossible, but it gives you leverage. It gives you a fighting chance. I rummaged beneath the cash, and there it was, a thick folder of official-looking documents, stamped and sealed by the city's Historical Preservation Society. My father hadn't just left me a house. He'd left me a fortress. He had armed me for the fight he knew was coming. The choice is yours, Leo, the letter concluded. You can take their money. I won't blame you if you do. It's a hard road I'm asking you to walk. Or you can stay. You can fight. You can bring this place back to life. You can finish the work I started. You can build a life here, a real one, on your own terms. Whatever you do, know that I love you, and I am proud of you. Be brave. Your father. I sat there in the crushing, absolute cold, the letter in one hand and a bundle of cash in the other. I could feel the weight of it all. The money, the history, the responsibility. I looked around at the dark, silent shapes of the workbenches, the ghosts of unfinished projects. This place wasn't worthless. It was priceless. And it was mine. I cried then. For the first time since my father died, I let myself break. I cried for my father, for the secret life he was forced to live. I cried for the years I'd lost with him, the conversations we never had. I cried for the lonely, scared kid I had been, and for the man I was suddenly being asked to become. The tears were hot on my cold face, and when they were gone, something inside me had settled. The fear was still there, but it wasn't in charge anymore. Underneath it was a hard, solid core of something new. Determination. I counted the money. It was $30,000. $30,000 and a fighting chance. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. It was a shield, a tool, a beginning. The next morning, I woke up on the dusty cot in the loft, stiff and freezing, but with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I had a purpose. I found the lawyer's card in the envelope Sharon had given me. Mr. Henderson. I walked for half an hour to a coffee shop, ordered the biggest coffee they had, and used their phone to make the call. His voice was calm and professional, but there was a warmth to it when I introduced myself. Leo, of course. I've been expecting your call. Your father was a good man. I was sorry to hear of his passing. He left me some things, I said, my voice unsteady. Some information. About the coach house. He said it has a historical designation. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Yes, it does, Mr. Henderson said, his voice sharpening with interest. David fought tooth and nail for that. It's a rather ironclad protection, as I recall. Why do you ask? A development company wants to buy the property. They want to demolish it. I see, he said slowly. And what do you want to do?" The question hung in the air. It was the first time anyone had asked me that in a very long time. What did I want? "I want to stay," I said, and the words felt more true than anything I had ever said. "I want to fix it up. I want to keep it." "Excellent," Mr. Henderson said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "That's what your father would have wanted. Now, listen carefully, Leo. Don't speak to the developers. Don't speak to your stepmother. Let me handle them. They'll try to bully you, to tell you the designation can be bypassed. It can, but it would cost them a fortune in legal fees and time, and developers hate both of those things. You have the upper hand here. You just need to be patient." He gave me instructions. The first step was to get the property legally and financially firewalled from the main estate sale. He would file the necessary injunctions. He also gave me the name of a contractor, an old man who specialized in historical restorations. "Tell him Frank Henderson sent you," he said. "He's expensive, but he's honest, and he was a friend of your father's." My next call was to the power company. I used a chunk of the cash for the deposit and to pay off any old debts on the property. They promised to send a crew out within 2 days. The simple act of making those calls, of taking control, was intoxicating. I was building something already, not with wood and nails, but with phone calls and decisions. I walked back to the coach house feeling taller. The world felt brighter, even under the same gray sky. The work was overwhelming. The first thing I did was clean. I spent 2 days just clearing out the junk, the trash, the debris of neglect. I filled dozens of garbage bags. With every bit of rubbish I cleared, the space felt lighter, more breathable. I found old photographs tucked away in drawers, pictures of my father in his 20s, beaming with pride next to a piece of furniture he'd just finished. I found his old record player and a box of vinyl, folk singers and old bluesmen. When the power was finally turned on, the first thing I did was plug it in. The sound of a scratchy guitar filled the vast space, and for the first time, the coach house felt less like a tomb and more like a home. It had a heartbeat. The contractor, a grizzled old man named Sal, showed up a few days later. He walked through the space, his eyes missing nothing. He ran a hand over the support beams, tapped on the walls, and spent a long time looking at the roof. I expected him to shake his head and give me an astronomical quote. Instead, he turned to me with a wry smile. "Your old man built this place to last," he said. "The bones are good. Real good. It's a mess, but it's an honest mess. We can save her." He told me what needed to be done first. The roof had to be patched, the broken windows replaced, and new insulation put in before winter truly set in. His quote was high, but fair. It would take a significant chunk of my remaining cash. I didn't hesitate. "Let's do it," I said. While Sal's crew worked on the exterior, I focused on the inside. I started reading my father's journals every night. I studied his designs, his notes on joinery, his philosophies on the nature of wood. It was like having him there with me, a quiet, patient teacher. I took out his tools from their hiding place. I cleaned them, sharpened them, and learned their names and their purposes. I started small, just as he'd advised. I took one of the half-finished projects, a simple wooden box, and I decided to complete it. My first attempts were clumsy. My cuts were crooked, my joints didn't fit. I got frustrated. I wanted to throw the wood across the room. But then I'd remember his words from the letters. "Be patient, the wood will teach you." So I'd take a deep breath, study his diagrams again, and try once more. Slowly, painstakingly, it started to come together. The day I finally fit the lid and it closed with a satisfying, snug click, I felt a surge of pride that was more powerful than any praise I had ever received. I had made something with my own 2 hands. A week later, I got a call from a blocked number. It was Sharon. Her voice was ice. "What do you think you're doing, Leo? My lawyer received a notice from your lawyer. You're holding up the sale. The developers are furious." "It's my property, Sharon," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm not selling. Don't be a fool, she hissed. It's a pile of rotting wood. Take the money. I even got them to go up to 15,000. That's more than it's worth. Take it and go. No, I said. It's worth more to me. What's gotten into you? This isn't you. You're not this difficult. You're not this difficult. The words hung in the air. She was right. The old Leo, the quiet, compliant ghost who lived in her house, wasn't difficult. But he wasn't really living, either. My father wanted me to have this place, I said. He wanted me to protect it. That's what I'm going to do. I could hear her sputtering with rage on the other end of the line before she hung up. I should have felt scared, but I just felt calm. The lines were drawn. I knew where I stood. Life fell into a new rhythm. Work, study, build. Sal's crew finished the roof and windows, and the house was finally watertight and secure. I had a small, functional kitchen area set up in one corner and a proper bed in the loft. I spent my days cleaning, sanding, and restoring the workshop itself. I spent my evenings practicing with the tools, working my way through the exercises my father had detailed in his journals. I was living on a shoestring budget, but I had never felt richer. One afternoon, a car I didn't recognize pulled up the long driveway. A man in an expensive suit got out. He had the slick, predatory look of someone who was used to getting his own way. He walked right up to the coach house door. "Leo?" he asked, not bothering with an introduction. "I'm with the development group. I think we need to have a chat." I stayed behind the door. "I'm not interested in selling." "Look, kid," he said, his voice dripping with condescending charm. "Don't be sentimental. It's a shack. We're prepared to offer you $25,000, cash. Think about what you could do with that." It was a lot of money. A year ago, it would have seemed like a lottery win. But now, it just felt like an insult. "This shack has a Grade 2 historical designation," I said, quoting the phrase I'd learned from Mr. Henderson. "Demolishing it would require a public review and the city council vote. It would be very expensive and very time-consuming for you." The man's charming smile vanished. "You've been talking to a lawyer." "I have," I said. "And he's advised me that my father's legacy is worth more than $25,000. Now please get off my property." He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes cold and appraising. He was reassessing me, realizing I wasn't the dumb, desperate kid he'd assumed I was. Without another word, he turned, got back in his car, and drove away. I never heard from him again. A month later, Mr. Henderson called. The developers had officially withdrawn their offer for my parcel. They were redrawing their plans to build around the coach house. I had won. I had actually won. That night, I opened the final letter from my father. It was in the envelope that had been sealed with wax. "My dearest son," it read. "If you are reading this, it means you chose to stay. You chose the harder path. I knew you would. You have a strength in you that you don't even recognize. It's the same strength your mother had. This house is yours now, not just legally, but truly. You have earned it. What you do with it is up to you. The world has enough real estate agents and condo developers. What it needs more of is people who make beautiful things. People who create. People who can see the heart of things. That is my true legacy to you. Not this building, not the money, not the tools. It's the chance to build a life of purpose. A life of your own making. I love you more than words can say. Now go build something beautiful. Dad." I folded the letter and tucked it into the first journal. I went over to the workbench where my latest project sat, a small, elegant writing desk, built from a single piece of reclaimed cherry wood based on one of his designs. I ran my hand over the smooth, sanded surface. It was far from perfect, but it was solid. It was real, and it was mine. The months that followed were full of hard work and small victories. I started taking on small repair jobs for people in the neighborhood, fixing old chairs and wobbly tables. Sal, the contractor, started recommending me for small restoration projects. My skills grew with every piece I worked on. I was slow, but I was meticulous, just as my father had taught me. I wasn't just fixing wood, I was mending pieces of people's lives, restoring their memories. I was making a name for myself. The coach house slowly transformed. What was once a dark, forgotten space was now filled with light, the smell of fresh-cut wood, and the music from my father's record player. I left one wall of the workshop unfinished, the old, scarred wood exposed, as a reminder of what it had been, a reminder of the journey. I finally confronted Sharon, not with anger, but with a quiet sense of peace. I sent her a single photograph of the restored workshop, sunlight streaming through the new windows, with a simple note. "Thank you, you gave me the key." She never replied, but I heard through Mr. Henderson that the sale of the main house went through. A new family moved in. Sometimes I see their kids playing on the lawn, and I wave. They wave back. I'm no longer the ghost at the edge of the property. I'm the craftsman in the coach house. I'm a part of the neighborhood, a part of the world. Looking back, the greatest gift my father left me wasn't the house or the money. It was the choice. He gave me a choice between an easy path and a meaningful one. He trusted me to be brave enough to choose the latter. He empowered me to save myself. That rusted key didn't just open a door to a dilapidated building, it opened the door to the rest of my life. It unlocked the person I was always meant to be. This story, my story, is about inheritance, but not the kind you read about in wills. It's about inheriting a legacy of resilience, of craft, of love that is strong enough to reach across time and give you a second chance. It's about understanding that sometimes the most worthless things we are given are actually the most valuable, because they force us to build our own worth from the ground up. And that's a foundation that no one can ever tear down. So I want to ask you, what have you been given that felt like a burden but turned out to be a gift? What worthless inheritance has saved you? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, because in this community, every story matters. Your story matters. And if this resonated with you, please consider subscribing. We're all just trying to build something beautiful in this world. And sometimes, we just need to be reminded that we have the tools to do it.